It's a company that has created wealth for investors. It's created a lot of respect for clients. It's created a lot of fear among competitors, and it's a company that has created a lot of awe amongst all the other corporates as well. Yes, we are talking about Fevicol Ka Jod, Pidilite, and who better than the outgoing MD and the incoming MD to join us? Bharat Puri, a legend, and Sudhanshu Vats, a legend in the making, if one must. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for agreeing to do this. 40 years in the industry, you've had a couple of decades as well. What a moment this is.
Absolutely. It's just time passes much more quickly than you think it does. But yes, it's a time to look back, but also, as I always believe, look forward.
So what are you looking forward to right now?
I will obviously continue to be involved with the corporate sector. I'll continue to be involved with Pidilite itself, but in a advisory, just seeing that we're on the right course and just gently whispering in Sudhanshu's ear on what needs to be done. But outside that, I'm on a couple of boards, and of course, one is a constant learner. So there is much on the plate. My wife, of course, believes that, listen, when you have that free time and I see more of you, I'll really believe that, you have moved on. But I think I will.
That's for you. How about you? 10% volume growth year on year with 20 to 24% margin band, growth categories, core categories, and pioneer categories. That's what you have to do for the next foreseeable future.
Yes, Manglam. I think, first of all, I think it's indeed an honor, and I'm humbled and honored to actually take over from Bharat. Bharat has had an outstanding innings, as you know, in Pidilite, and of course, 4 decades plus of corporate career. I think, as you rightly described him, he's a legendary leader. And as you rightly pointed out, Manglam, I think for me, I look forward to having the continuity as we go forward, because big companies are built on consistency and having continued strength in their strategy and execution. But at the same time, bringing in the right level of change. And, in running parlance on a treadmill, it's now changing the gear or changing the speed, one up, and maybe even the incline half up. So let's see how that so that's the work and I'm very excited and I look forward to.
You spoke about his tenure. I was just looking at some of the numbers. The last time we spoke versus now, the time you took over, Pidilite, from there, the revenue has quadrupled. The EBITDA margins have increased by about 600 basis points. By that measure, the EBITDA has grown 6 times. The net profit has grown by about 8 times, and the market cap has actually grown by 10 times. So 10 years ago, if one bought a Pidilite share, it was for 280 rupees. Now it's close to 2,800 rupees. Which implies the market cap addition has been close to 1,30,000 crores. That's some boots to fill.
Thank you for all those kind words, but really remember, this is actually a wonderful Pidilite team that has delivered all of this. I've been fortunate to be the orchestra conductor and just made sure that people play in tune. But really, this is also a very strong foundation provided by the family. B, wonderful team to work with. And C, of course, somebody up there likes us.
Curiosity, how is it that you decide what will be the category which will be a category, a pioneer category? How do you decide upon where to go? At what level do you decide that, okay, now this becomes a growth category, now growth becomes a core category? How do you do that? What are the thresholds?
As far as pioneer categories are concerned, we have a very simple 2x2, which is A, channel, and B, consumer. On the other side, the right to win and the customer. When we have at least 3 of the 4 ticked, then it's a shortlisted category. I have 2 of my most senior managers who actually were pulled out of CEO jobs at Pidilite and who actually scour the world, look at affinity markets a few years ahead of us, so on what could be emerging categories in the home improvement space. Right. They will come with a long list. We will then look and see, listen, this makes sense. Yes, here we have a chance to, for example, create the category. We will then put in a mix and pilot. Normally test product first, then pilot. The wonderful thing is, as you and me speak, we have at least 10 pilots on the market. Okay. But those happen below the radar. Once it reaches a certain meets a certain set of action standards, we then say, okay, ready to be pioneer category. Now the button is pressed. It should be approximately 100 crores in 3 years. It then becomes a growth category. Fortunately, India is a lovely growth market. So for a growth category to become a core category is a much longer runway, because then you have to say that, listen, largely the category creation task is done. It's about now growing the category via innovation or via premiumization or via sales and distribution. Core is clear that, listen, I mean, the biggest mistake any company can make is assume that the core is mature, and a lot of times fellows will say, okay, listen, oh, this is a mature category. Well, there are no mature categories, there are only tired managers, right?
That's a good one.
So as far as we're concerned, core categories must lead the growth. You must grow 1 to 2 times GDP. Hopefully, when we correlate well to GDP growth. So the core category should grow at GDP, and then your own efforts, whether they're at innovation, whether they're at premiumization, whether they're at sales and distribution, should give you that further multiplier. And when we look back over our last 10 years, I think that's been one of our formulas where from 80-20, core 80-20 to growth and pioneer, we're now pretty much 55-45, 52-40, let's just say 55-45. That itself has given us a flywheel for growth. So every quarter when you come and harass me and ask me, this double-digit volume growth, why are you guys doing it, the others not? And I said, probably the portfolio and the sector that we're in makes a lot of difference.
Now I'll be harassing him a lot more. What has been the success ratio from piloting to pioneer, from pioneer to growth, and from growth to core?
Yeah, so Mangalam, it's a great question. While I may not be able to put a number to it, but I'll tell you how we look at this at Pidilite. I think one is that we have enormous patience during the piloting stage as well, where we keep doing do, learn, do. So we are never in a hurry to say, okay, this is not working, shut it. Does that mean that everything which we do succeeds? No. But the point is that we are enormously patient. We do a lot of do, learn, do. We take a lot of feedback. So one of the strengths of Pidilite, actually, and not only in developing pioneering, but it's become a part of DNA because of this journey, is that you continuously take feedback and you continuously iterate. And the focus, Mangalam, compared to many other companies, having had worked with many other very good organizations, I can tell you the focus is first and foremost on seeing what could we have done better. Because most of the time the tendency is, oh, this is not right, the market is sluggish, as we were just talking about, or the consumer is not ready. But the first question you have to ask is that, what have we not done right? So I think that philosophy keeps making. You would see that a lot of our pioneering categories have got into growth. The latest example I could share with you is that of ROF, yes. and it is a very promising growth category, continuing to do very well. But I think we've had many such examples as we go forward.
And what about paints? You call it a growth category for yourself. What's your strategy here? Because you kept saying that you'll take some time, you'll understand it, you'll understand the market, etc. Haisha, now you've identified it as a pioneer category. What's your strategy here?
Well, simple. Mangalam, that hasn't changed. We believe we have a right to win in small town and rural India. That's exactly what we're doing. We're steadily making progress, getting our model right. We're still in the southern states, the 4 southern states. We haven't expanded beyond. And we'll get the model right, be clear that this pilot works before we cut, copy, paste to the rest. But as we've always said, listen, paints today is anywhere between 60 and 80,000 crores, depending on who estimates the category. 30% of that is small town and rural. If you're a top 3 player, and frankly, when you go to these markets, there are not more than 3 players there anyway, that itself is a substantial driver of growth for us, and also is a much better profit pool than the urban markets.
It took you all so long, one, in entering this category, because the obvious correlation was there until then. And what have your learnings about this industry been through the pilot that you've come up with?
So I tell you, from the timing perspective, I think one thing which is happening in paints now, and that's why you're seeing so much action, Mangalam, I think it is one of the large consumer categories of India, which has also got a promise of growing in double digits. So I think that's a given, whether urban or rural. Yeah. Now, within that also, to Bharat's point, I think our belief is, and that to the timing there, our belief is that the small town India and rural India, which traditionally had much lower per capita incomes and therefore was traditionally a smaller market, and if I could use the word, marginally ignored market by the existing traditional players because the market was largely urban, was not perhaps ready that much. Our belief is, and you can see that, Mangalam, in many categories, I believe the action is now shifting a lot more to small town and rural India. We believe while this is a smaller pie of the market, as Bharat just told you, 30%, but it may arguably grow faster. Per capita incomes are also uniformly growing now, and therefore there will be more income in the hands of the consumer to be able to indulge in some of these things and to do some of this. More new houses, more areas to paint. So we feel the timing is correct.
What do you believe is your right to win here, apart from the distribution that is there? I mean, is it the promise of a Pidilite brand? Is it Haisha? We're just trying to figure out why should a consumer buy a Pidilite brand?
See, the right to win first is our ability to reach where very few else can.
Okay.
The second is we know the category.
Despite the others being actually quite big and well entrenched in the country.
In the country, yes, but in urban India largely, not in these parts, so on and so forth. The second thing is at Pidilite, we always start with a better product. So and the wonderful thing is the moment you say it's a Pidilite product, the acceptance, this whole thing on from the makers of Fevicol, we've had very little resistance. Therefore, I mean, there is a strong equity to start from. I think all of this gives you enough of a right to win. I mean, forget, I can keep adding on other elements of the Pidilite secret sauce, but some of them should remain secret.
Again, it's a larger total addressable market, but it's also margin dilutive, right? The Lira does slightly high teens, and that also under threat right now. You have a margin guided band of 20 to 24 odd percent. Chances are that it might be margin dilutive.
Let's wait and watch. That's exactly why do you pilot things to exactly determine all of this? So give us another, by this summer, we will come back to you and tell you, okay, listen, what's exactly what we believe is the paint model, how it should go forward.
You have a fairly healthy cash balance. You are aggressive acquirers. AkzoNobel is on the block. You are one of the people who've bid for it. There are a lot who've fallen out of the bid because of valuations. Where do you stand on that?
We have no knowledge of any such bid. I read about it in the papers just as you do.
After you've made the bid.
On AkzoNobel, when we have something to report, we will. But as we said, listen, Pidilite is a conservative, very clear, value-based investor. We never flex our balance sheet. Just because we are cash-rich, debt-free, doesn't mean that we will ever splurge money. So when the right time comes, we will talk about it, but right now we have nothing to talk about.
As an asset, what do you think of it?
I see what I'm saying is that there could be a personal view, so on and so forth, etc. So at the moment, there are enough interested fellows who have lots of thoughts about the assets. Let them give their thoughts.
And about the very near term, the consumer environment that we're in. Obviously, you guys have done your internal assessment of where Pidilite can be better, etc. But from an environment standpoint, what do you think needs to happen for growth to return, according to you?
See, in our view, growth will return. I think people have underestimated the impact of last year's elections and therefore the slowdown and the amount of time it took for the whole system to crank up, so on. For example, if you look at the first 3 quarters, which is what we've published, we're close to double-digit underlying volume growth, which is what we've always promised. So, I can crib and say that, listen, life could be better, urban could be, of course. But remember, in a country as large as this, there will be ups and downs. But now with this, recent budget announcements where consumers are seeing money in their hands, you're also seeing that the monsoon has been good, so April onwards money will come. Maybe the first quarter will not be a bumper quarter, but I think the India growth story is not going to go away.
The high-frequency data that you see on a regular basis for your company, what does that tell you about the consumer sentiment here and now?
So, Mangalam, I think we've spoken about this earlier as well. What we are beginning to see is a clear resurgence in the rural demand post the monsoon, a little bit. Albeit slow, but we are clearly seeing that pattern. As far as urban demand is concerned, I think in our sectors, Mangalam, and therefore now I'm talking about how we look at it, it has been where it comes to construction, where it comes to home improvement and so on and so forth, the demand has been quite steady. I'm saying the point is it could always be better, as Bharat was just saying. So I'm saying the point is we would want it to be a bit more better, a little bit more buoyancy. But having said that, I think we've been seeing steady this thing, and that's why we've been delivering steady returns as well, steady numbers as well.
And plus, if you look at it, the one thing that makes us also a little more hopeful is the real estate sector turned about 3 years back, at best 4 years back, but mainly 3 years back when you had a lot of things getting completed. we find that we get the maximum benefit of that in T+3, T+4. So a lot of the construction that has happened in urban India, etc., is all going to now come up for what you would call completion of interiors. And that's always, while even now repair and renovation is a larger part of our business than is new construction, this is a good multiplier.
Right. So, final question before we take a break. Final question on the business side of things. You have earmarked your growth targets, 10% volume growth year on year, along with the margin band that you've spoken about, growth coming in from core categories, growth categories, pioneer categories as well. When I look at your business, say 5 years from now, when I'm speaking to Sudhanshu, what would you see as the revenue mix of the company? How much of that would come from international? It's 55 core, 45 growth and pioneer right now. How does the revenue mix of the business Pidilite look like?
So I think, when we started this journey, and Bharat spoke about it, 2080, and now we are close to about 55 core or 80-20, 80 core, 20 growth and pioneer. Now we are 55 core and 45 growth and pioneer. Our sense is this is a near equilibrium. So therefore, because to the question you would ask some time back, which is that, what happens is pioneer becomes core and then, growth and growth becomes core. Right. So therefore, there will be a mix of that which will be happening, and we are at a pretty healthy equilibrium, in my opinion. And I think from the point of view of the second thing you said, 5 years out, on the international piece, yes. I think the second part of your question, see, we are currently 10% plus on our international composition. Our thinking is that we will continue to remain focused in emerging markets where we can replicate the success of India and the model of India onto those markets. So I think we will continue to build and strengthen our presence in these markets, drive these markets further, and therefore the ratios will keep inching upwards. We will be an emerging markets multinational company, which is something we have stated. We are steadfast on that journey.
And how much comes in from paints?
That's only astrologers can tell me.
What we'll do is we'll take a short break on that note, come back. We'll have a more fun conversation with Bharat and Sudhanshu. Welcome back in conversation with the leaders at Pidilite. We've spoken a fair bit about business. Let's speak a little about your journeys as well, and 2 decisions that, according to you, changed the game for Pidilite in your tenure.
A, get the portfolio right. B, get the team and people and culture right.
Was there a decision that you think could have gone either way at some point when the company was at a crossroads? If you could take us through that.
So we've had a lot of, if a company does not make mistakes, then they are not risking enough. So we made lots of mistakes. Fortunately, our whole model is based on experiment a lot, experiment in small places, with small amounts at stake, and once you've got it right, then bet the farm.
All right. And the one piece of advice that you would give to Sudhanshu as he takes over?
A, be himself. C, keep smiling, work hard and play hard.
And the one thing that you will do slightly differently than what was done earlier while maintaining the core?
So I think one area which we will accelerate, we've talked about this as well, is our continuous journey on digital and AI and that transformation. So how do we keep the organization ready? Because my belief is, Mangalam, all companies are technology companies in today's day and age. And how do we infuse more of that? We've begun that journey, but how do we accelerate that journey?
And what new business line or product categories excite you the most right now as you look into the next decade?
So there are quite a few. I think our tile adhesive business, which Bharat talked about, has a huge runway. Our waterproofing business continues to have a considerable runway. And then we have newer pieces which are coming in. I think our intended entry into electronics adhesives is also going to be exciting. And that's a pioneering space as of now, but that's an interesting space.
That's something that I'm very personally excited about as well, because I said that on the air the other day, that anything where 2 things can be joined, Pidilite is looking at entering that space itself. From Asian Paints to Mondelez to Pidilite, what has been the most unconventional leadership lesson that you've learned across your...
A lot of times people tell you that you have to be a certain kind of person to succeed in a certain environment. And I went from a nice collegiate environment to Cadbury, which was then a little more formal, so on and so forth. Cadbury became Mondelez, which was, from being a British company, it suddenly became an American company, and everybody said, oh, this is going to be very hierarchical. Frankly, the lesson I learned was you can only be yourself, back yourself, and, while you listen to everybody, you can never be anybody but yourself. So be authentic to what your style is and what you do.
You both have decades of leadership behind you. From when you started to now, what has changed and what has remained the same in business itself, and how have you all, moved yourselves with the times?
See, I think what has remained the same, for example, broadly, I would say for myself, I've always had a consistent leadership style. I'm very clear, a leader first should be very clear where he's going, or he or she is going, and B, he should be able to excite others to go on that journey with them believing it's their journey. And he should be able to create an environment where people enjoy the journey, enjoy themselves, and there's a mattress to fall back if they have mistakes. And the leader's job is to just do that. I don't think that has changed. It doesn't matter whether you're here or you're in Switzerland or you're in Singapore. That's the philosophy I followed. What's changed is, frankly, agility. I mean, that whole adage of, now it's not look before you leap, it is look while you leap, and the ability to therefore decide far more quickly, be clear that making mistakes is much easier. I think really the big change is from a nice test match world, it's a T20 world.
What's your highest high in Pidilite been so far and the lowest low?
My highest high, very simply, is I was at a sales conference about 2 years back, and I do an exercise with this. I mean, I'm a very firm believer in listening to the sales force, and you got a set of, salesmen up on the stage, and you ask them the question, tell me 2 things that have really changed in this company, and 2 things that we should change. And they all got together, they said, sir, एक चीज़ जो बदल गई है, अब ऐसा है इस कंपनी में हमारी सुनवाई होती है, यहाँ कुछ भी हम बोले तो उस पर टाइम बेशक लगे पर एक्शन ज़रूर होता है. I think that is a real, if your sales force can tell you that, listen, I have this, so on and so forth, and I can say this frankly to the MD of the company, I think that's a real high.
And the lowest low?
I think the lowest low was losing colleagues during COVID.
And what would your favorite Pidilite ad be?
My favorite Pidilite ad is the Fevicol sofa ad.
You?
It's a very tough one between the sofa and the bus, but I would also say sofa. That sofa is like,
It's incredible.
Since one was intimately, I mean, you know that it was actually supposed to be a radio spot and how it became but I think the Pandey brothers have excelled themselves.
One thing that you admire about Bharat and you wish you had?
His gargantuan memory about people. He will remember everybody Mangalam he has met by name. But not only that, he will then have the history. He will tell you where he met him, where he met you, who your partner or spouse is, how are your children doing. Where does he get all of that for everyone? And starting from the doorman to the board colleagues or chairman, I'm saying, it's for everyone and all across the country, wherever he meets.
What about Sudhanshu? What you found was, something which was new and something that you found very refreshing and inspiring perhaps?
See, refreshing, first, and this was obviously one of the also reasons why we were keen to get him on board. He's a very decent human being. Sudhanshu is genuinely a good guy, okay? And that's very important in Pidilite. You want people with their heart in the right place. But what I admire about this fellow is his discipline. Keep him and make sure he consumes some amount of single malt at night, but next morning he's running 10 kilometers at an unearthly hour again, and I really admire his discipline and the ability of how he does that.
And what would your legacy be, according to you, at Pidilite?
There are enough people to tell you that. I don't believe that I have to talk about let others tell me what my legacy is.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bharat. Thank you so much, Sudhanshu. This has been an absolute pleasure. Wish you both a great life. You at Pidilite, you post Pidilite. And for all the investors who are watching Pidilite ki duniya, that's what they're looking at, right? Fevicol ka jod. Whether that continues or not is something only time will tell. And time has told you it has continued well.